This is Jim Pepsi, your host on The Real Deal. It's a real pleasure for Gary King to be interviewing Larry Rivera for today's show, where Larry addressed the role of Buell Wesley Frazier during the Santa Barbara conference, which I believe is going to be the only 50th anniversary event that will have enduring significance. You've already heard from Phil Nelson. You've already heard from John Hankey. You've already heard from Peter Janney. Here you have a chance to hear from Larry Rivera, whom, along with Richard Hook, I regard as one of the very best of the new generation of students of JFK.
Yeah, Gary. Well, that was a tremendous experience in Santa Barbara, one of a kind, the 50th anniversary. All of the presentations were excellent. My particular area had to do with, like you just mentioned, Buell Wesley Frazier, and how important his role was in the whole scheme of the railroading of Lee Oswald as far as the patsy for the assassination. Basically, I went through different areas about Frazier, specifically how he got to his employment at the Texas School Book Depository, how long he had been in Dallas at that time, which we found out it had only been a couple of months. Him being only 19 years old is very significant, especially, at that part of his life. Him being thrown into this entire assassination environment, what happened, We, went through many of the aspects, how he got his employment. For example, Linnie Mae, his sister, supposedly got him his job over there. He had gone to Dallas, Irving, the suburb of Irving, specifically to get away from his alcoholic, abusive stepfather, David Williams. This was actually chronicled, by Hugh Ainsworth in a Dallas Morning News article later on. That was sort of piqued my interest there. Why would Frazier, be trying to get away from his alcoholic, abusive father, end up, right there in Irving?
Hugh Ainsworth, we all know about him, a complete, total shill.
Yes.
All right, excuse me, but when I hear his name, my blood starts to run.
Yeah, well, they call him now his babysitter, Frazier's babysitter. He doesn't do anything, unless he consults with Ainsworth, who's still around. So, Ainsworth actually happened to be a very important person in this whole thing, because he was, like he claims, he was at every significant part and event during the weekend of the assassination.
Literally everywhere. At Oswald's assassination, he was at the Texas School Book Depository. Right. He was in Dealey Plaza. He was there when Jack Ruby. It's just amazing that he was literally everywhere, and I think he's full of it.
Yes. So, Linnie tried to find him employment at many places there in the area. She actually, in her deposition, in the testimony, mentioned, she had tried to find employment for him, for people who didn't have that much education. So, the same day that he interviewed with Roy Truly, he was hired, and this all happened in sequence at the same time. Lee Oswald is also getting a job there. Frazier had only been there, a couple of weeks before Oswald landed his job there, so that timing there is a little suspect as far as I'm concerned. We all know they lived, within walking distance of each other. He was staying with his sister, and at the time, his mother was staying there at the same time because his father was hospitalized for alcoholism. They didn't even have any space for him. He was sleeping on the couch. So that's part of how Frazier actually got in that environment there. And he had Chevy. Everybody knows the person who took Lee Oswald, gave him a ride, the famous ride down to the Texas School Book Depository, and were the ones who actually, or supposedly, allegedly witnessed the famous package allegedly brought in by Lee Oswald into the Texas School Book Depository. And it's very interesting because we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes as far as the dimension concerned. And we presented some very interesting images about that package that I thought were a little funny. Once people actually got to see what an actual Mannlicher Carcano, even broken down, looked like when it was packaged up in the way that the Warren Commission said it alleged that it was. So, on November 22nd, we all know he picked up Lee and he drove him to work. Lee had been waiting outside. He walked half block, from the Payne residence. And he took us Stemmen, went downtown, and went around. We don't know if he went up Main or Commerce or whatever, but the point of his route and where he parked is extremely important because later on there was some testimony that when the House Select Committee on Assassinations convened in 1977, where there was other employees, actually black employees, who came out and offered another story about what Frazier actually did or did not do that day, and how Lee got into the building. The way that they got there, which was down Houston, and then they went out on Record Street, and then supposedly down to that distant employee parking lot, which is way, way behind the railroad tracks. It's very interesting because the Warren Commission published the Commission Exhibit 381, which was used by Joseph Ball to show the street where supposedly Lee and Frazier walked down as they approached the Texas School Book Depository from that supposedly distant employee parking, which I just mentioned. And the terrain involved here is extremely difficult. You've got all kinds of railroad tracks and trestles and trenches and what have you. The way that the Warren Commission presented Houston Street, which supposedly, as presented in Commission Exhibit 381, went right through the railroad track and right through the railroad yard. And if you look closely at the images, and then there's another document, 496, and for those people who like to go and look at all these exhibits and documents that I'm citing here, on page 51, you will see where they took a picture of the railroad yard from the position of one of the upper floors of the Texas School Book Depository, showing that area where Frazier parked, supposedly. And it's nothing but, like I just mentioned, railroad tracks, box cars, all of this really difficult terrain and topography for you to traverse, where it wasn't simply a street with its own sidewalk where you just walked up the street. You see what I'm saying?
So it looked like an obstacle course in boot camp?
That's right. So, and not only that, it had rained that morning, so it would have been muddy and messy and everything. And nobody ever mentions Lee Oswald being, full of mud or anything as he entered that day. It's never ever been mentioned. You fast forward to 77 when these other employees were interviewed, specifically Edward Shields. And Mr. Shields actually talked about how they had seen Frazier walk by himself from the position where he had parked. They asked him what happened with his passenger. They knew that he had carpooled with Lee on other occasions. And they asked him, and he said, I dropped him off at the building, which is what Frazier answered. So right there, we're starting to get a different perspective of what happened here as far as if Frazier actually waited. And the official story, he revved up his engine to charge his battery and so forth, and he let Lee walk ahead of him, saw him walk with a package cupped under his armpit, and that story just doesn't hold any water at all. So then there's other testimony, like Jack Doherty, who testified that he didn't see Oswald carry any type of package into the depository that morning. And so we start to see that we have a problem with that. Then look at Frazier's deposition, Joseph Ball. And Joseph Ball is trying to present, he actually did Commission Exhibit 381. And Frazier, and this is where he's starting to think that, wait a minute, Frazier, might have been a little bit smarter than we gave him credit for. He actually said that when he asked him about, about the street, Houston Street, he noticed, and you can tell, where he's noticing that streets did not go through the railroad yard as it was pictured, as it was presented in Commission Exhibit 381. And Frazier actually said, that is where you say the street goes on. And specifically what he said was, I see that as right there where you say that is the street going up to the parking lot there. Sort of like it's a subtle message there that Frazier was trying to send, perhaps. Later on in his life, which I'm going to talk about briefly, later on, which I call his epiphany, where as he matured and he started to realize the significant historically that his experience had to do with this whole situation, and that he's trying to tell us the duress under which he was, especially as a young man, 19 years old. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what actually happened to him after the assassination, which is very, very important in the whole scheme of things, Buell Wesley Frazier. After he dropped him off and everything, and like I was just mentioning Joseph Ball, and how many depositions. I talked about how many, he took so many depositions, and he was such a key player as far as getting all this testimony in the right direction if they wanted to for the Warren Commission, setting up the official version that they wanted. And when you look at the testimony that he took, most of it is extremely crucial. I'm talking about Buell Wesley Frazier, Sister Lenny Mae, Billy Lovelady, Joe Molina, Danny Arce, Bill Shelley, Luke Mooney, Lee Bowers, Jack Doherty, Tom Dillard, on and on and on. Some of the motorcycle cops, Whaley, the cab driver. Those are just some that come off the top of my mind. And then as you explore more and more, what Joseph Ball was about, and you do more research on him, you realize that he was a very key player in what the Warren Commission, ended up being.
He was just another art inspector, but not quite as famous, I guess.
Well, I think he was more important. Art inspector had a very, very crucial part of the Warren Commission, the magic bullet theory and everything. But I think the legwork, so to speak, what was really done by Joseph Ball. David Bellin was another one also. Basically, what he did with Frazier was sort of bring that falsified map to the record, sort of soften up that idea of them, those two, walking up Eastern Street, which did not exist at that time at all. And those two documents that I just cited, CD 496 and CD 381, all you got to do is look at those. They are not the same. It's very clear to me. So then what we did, we went and we talked about the package, and this is really hilarious because people don't realize that this rifle was brought in, knocked down, and in pieces. And it had 5 different screws. When the Warren Commission and the FBI went about trying to come up with how this rifle had been put together, a fellow FBI agent by the name of Cortland Cunningham, and this is in the second volume, pages 251 and 252, where he actually told the commission that this rifle had been assembled with a dime. And that's impossible to torque. You have to torque these screws to the correct amount of in this case would be inch pounds, so that the rifle is not misaligned. Even a rifle, an inferior type of rifle that this was, Mannlicher Carcano, required a screwdriver. And their excuse, their scenario was that Lee took it up disassembled and he put it together with a dime, when he had a chance to do it. And then we also offered a very nice collage there, which showed Frazier in Nigel Turner's The Men Who Killed Kennedy, showing him, as he was showing how the rifle had been cupped under his armpit, and cupped in his hand. Ian Griggs recreated the assembly and the transport of the rifle. The image that we offered as the rifle in 2 pieces with the butt and the barrel, scope and everything, and the package was at least, maybe 6 inches wide, maybe even wider, and it protruded more than a foot above the shoulder area of Mr. Pierre Now, who was doing this reenactment along with Mr. Griggs. So Mr. Griggs done quite a lot of research on this. We showed beyond any reasonable doubt, that was just hogwash. There's just no way. And then it weighed almost 8 pounds. So if you try to visualize the situation, you have to be very gullible to believe something like that.
So we're talking about a 19-year-old kid here. Do you believe that he was placed there in that situation?
It could have been in a passive way, because it's possible that he might have been used by forces unknown, and I'm not going to mention any names here, but his car, everybody talked about Lee supposedly throwing the package into the back seat of the car, and it also could have been that they just put the rifle in the trunk of his car, and he unknowingly transported it. And that's why he parked way out where he did. It was called the parking lot number 1, but they had a second building called State Building, in the State Building, where they had where they used to store, textbooks, away from the main building, which was the Texas School Book Depository there on 411 Elm Street. Mm-hmm. So just so you'll know, it was that's why he parked where he parked. But it was away, quite a ways away from the main building.
So there were 2 depository buildings that you would work in.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay.
And in fact, that's where they had most of the black workers, working over there, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, it was a different day and time in Dallas, Texas at that time. Buell always seemed an innocent, just useful idiot to me. That's always been my impression.
Well, and now it gets better. It gets much better here now. So then we When we're trying to actually find out where Buell was, and we start looking at images, there's nothing more revealing than the Wigman film, which was an 8mm film taken by Dave Wigman in a moving car, and I believe was the seventh vehicle in the motorcade behind the JFK limo. And he just happened to film as he was turning Houston on the Elm, and just happened to catch the entrance of the Texas School Book Depository within maybe 6 or 7 seconds or 8 seconds after Zapruder 313. So he's actually catching the exact position of everybody that was there at the doorway. If you examine closely, you see different images of the people that are there. And one that stands out right there in the middle is Buell Wesley Frazier. So we went in and looked for other images. For example, his CBS interview that they did with him, and you can see the hairstyle and everything and the body type. And he was, 6'2" or whatever, tall, young man, slender looking, long-limbed, that kind of thing. And right away, I mean, it doesn't, you don't need to be a rocket scientist. In my mind, that looked exactly like him. The images are blurry, but Wigman actually panned back. After he went down the street, he actually panned back, and you see 5 other frames from that film, and, it looks very much like Buell Wesley Frazier. Mm-hmm. Then we found images of him actually at the station house at City Hall that night, and lo and behold, he's wearing exactly the same clothing, which was a light jacket, black jacket, dark colored jacket, light colored trousers, maybe light colored blue denim. It's in black and white. Could have been khaki or whatever. We made this collage, we actually did a blow up of that image, and then we found that picture of him in the hallway of the Dallas Police Department, and it was exactly the same person, the long neck. And then started looking at some of the documents that were taken that night. For example, he had an FBI report of 11/23, which stated that he was standing on the front steps of the Texas School Book Depository with Mr. Bill Shelley, facing down Houston, and blah, blah. And his warrant commission testimony, which I'll go a little bit more into detail in a minute, that I was standing, like I say, one step down from the top. And then that same night, he did a handwritten statement, and right there, he said in his own handwriting, I was standing on the front steps of the building when the parade came by, and I watched the parade go by, and after President Kennedy had got out of my sight, I heard 3 shots. Okay? I mean, it's pretty clear-cut, Gary,
It's him.
As far as I'm concerned, yeah, he's talking about it, the FBI talked about it, it's in the Warren Commission, and look at the Wigman, the space that was afforded in that area, which I'm going to also, it's very, very important, we'll touch on, in a little bit, and what actually happened with that entrance later on, I think it's very revealing. We established that was Buell Wesley Frazier's exact position right there in the middle of the steps of the doorway, and I thought it's been proven beyond any shadow of a doubt. Look at the evidence, I don't think that we can come up with any other conclusion there.
There's no doubt about that. All right, we're going to take it right there. Hang on 1 minute. We'll be right back with Larry Rivera. All right, we're talking about Buell Wesley Frazier, his critical role in the assassination. Larry was one of the speakers at the Santa Barbara conference, the cutting edge on JFK assassination. This is the continuation of Jim Garrison's investigation. We are on the trail of the assassins, and we are with a man who's making it happen right now. All right, Larry, we're going to have to pick it up where we were, and let's get back on track.
Yeah, okay, well, on the day of the assassination, Frazier then disappeared, and he was unaccounted for until 6:45. And during that time, some detectives went over to Irving to visit not only the Payne residence, but also looking for Frazier. And they got a hold of Lenny May, and Lenny May sent them on a wild goose chase, saying that he was over at Parkland Hospital visiting his father, and his father was at the Irving Professional Medical Center. That's where he was convalescent. So they, for some reason that we still do not know, well, she must have been somehow buying time for Frazier. She sent them to Parkland. Then after a while they realized he wasn't there. They went to back to Irving, and they found him at past 6 p.m. At the Irving Professional Center with the same stepfather, that he had left Huntsville, in the first place. That's sort of strange. And he had only been there for not even an hour. I guess he was only there for half an hour. So he's unaccounted for at least 5 hours. Up until today, we still don't know where Frazier was for 5 hours, totally unaccounted for. He's the only one who knows, and that lends itself to all kinds of speculation. And of course, then what's really, you must speculate, on what his real role must have been. And you were speculating he might have been some kind of courier, or a driver, either taking somebody to maybe one of the so many different small airports around the area. So that could have been possible. And then that night, the night of 11/22, that's when the famous polygraph took place. First, they went in and did affidavits with him and his sister. And it's very interesting because there is an incident that we had never heard about, and it just happened that when the 6th Museum interviewed him, on July 13. Frazier actually revealed many things that I thought were, very, very important. And one of the things that he said was that Captain Fritz actually asked him and came in with a typed statement for him to confess that he had knowledge of the JFK assassination. And after reading a couple of sentences, Frazier protested that he wasn't going to sign that, at all. Fritz actually raised his hand as if to hit him, and to which Frazier reacted and told Fritz that even with cops standing outside, he would be sure to get a couple of good licks in, and you will remember me. So Fritz snatched the unsigned statement and stormed out of the room. So, and Frazier's also, wondering, why they can't accept what he's trying to tell them. What is it that he's trying to tell them? Maybe the truth. Then we also found a very revealing video clip of him at the DPD that night. We hadn't seen pictures of him from the waist down. And we're wondering, what was he wearing? What kind of pants was he wearing that night? And in this video clip, lo and behold, he's wearing the same pants that he's wearing, you can see him wearing in the Wigman. So I thought that really clinched it as far as where was Frazier, what position was he on the steps at the entrance of the Texas School Book Depository, and that could sort of confirm that was Frazier right there, right in the middle of the entrance. Mm-hmm. So because we found that video clip, courtesy, and we must thank the 6th Ward Museum, they just laid it out for us there. And, the jacket that he was wearing that night. And then what happens to Frazier after that? Well, he gets drafted. Vietnam comes calling, and he gets drafted at 21. And he gets drafted into the Army as a cook in 1965. He goes to basic training, and then 23 months after the assassination, returns to the continental U.S., and he's assigned to Fort Lewis in Washington State. This happened to be close to Seattle, which was a major embarkation point going to Vietnam. In my mind, it's pretty obvious, that they scared him out of his wits and just dangled him there and said, hey, you got to behave. And then all of a sudden, he's released from active duty and transferred to U.S. Army Reserve in August of 1967. And how do we know this? Well, we went and we did a FOIA request for his Army records, and we got those. And all this information is right there with the dates, what bases he was at, so forth. And so when you look at the timing of this and how Frazier then he completely missed the Vietnam War, as if it never happened. They didn't send him, and apparently he behaved. He wasn't going to be talking to any investigators or researchers or so many people who were trying to find him and interview him. It's pretty obvious that he's going to keep his mouth shut, all these people. Mm-hmm. And so then in 1967, he was subpoenaed by Garrison right there in New Orleans for the Clay Shaw trial. And he was very disturbed. There's documents that we found, that actually talk about how upset he was and that he didn't want to talk to the press, and that one of the conditions would be that they would not make him available to the press. And in the testimony that he offered at the trial, he talked about his position versus Lovelady and Shelley's. And, this is totally ridiculous, totally contrary to what he said in his Warren Commission testimony, where he's at the top of the stairs and Lovelady and Shelley are right down in front of him at the bottom of the steps. And I'm going, wow, this is probably the reason why, guess what? They send him back into the Army, and then they make him re-enlist. But they make him re-enlist after the end of the war, 1973. This is very, very special treatment. I don't know of anybody who might have gotten that type of treatment, especially in a war as notorious as the Vietnam War, where we lost so many young men, and so many men were drafted, and then so many men had to go to Canada to evade the draft and take those type of measures. And Frazier is crazy. He skips the Vietnam War, and then, after the war, he's back in the Army. Goes in and ends as a sergeant, and doing very special. You know, he had very special treatment. You know, if you look at the Army records, you know, it's pretty obvious. Then in the early 70s, George O'Toole, he started working on the Frazier case, and he started to do voice stress analysis on Frazier's CBS interview that was right after the assassination, and he determined that there was a great deal of deception in what he was. It was only a 42-second exchange. He determined it from the PSC charts. You know, that he was in a condition of sheer terror. O'Toole's book, Assassination Tapes, he doesn't only deal with Frazier. He deals with a lot of the members of the Dallas Police Department. O'Toole didn't know where Frazier was. He had to go find Tony Pellicano. Very roundabout way, found him, and he did these recordings. He found, and he was able to verify with his own machine, voice stress analysis machine, that he was actually very upset, and there was a lot of deception in what he was saying. And O'Toole concluded that the case of Frazier and his supposed polygraph of November 22nd went at the very heart of the mystery of November 22nd and the assassination. And why did it provoke such hard stress and false statements and lapses of memory and so forth among the Dallas police officers who should have been the most familiar with it? The answer to these questions can only be the darkest speculation. So then which brings us to the Alchin's 6 photograph. As you look at the Wigman, you know, the Alchin's is the counterpart, but from a different perspective, going from down Alchin's position down Elm Street on the north curb. It's actually the same people that are there, only from a different angle. And Wigman captures so many figures, but then you look at the Alchins, and there's one of them that's missing in there. That brings us to any alterations in the Alchins that we also talked a little bit about. For example, Dennis Camino did some very, very nice work on this, raising the gamma values of the image, and found many, many areas of ink blotting and airbrushing and cut and paste lines and the entrance and everything, and people erased from the crowd. They were at the curb. If you look at the Secret Service car behind behind LBJ's limo, you'll see that the faces of the agents has been erased, blotted out. And then you go and you look at the fire escape where that black man is there sitting at the fire escape, and there's also a big ink block right there blocking part of the frame there. When you compare that with the Alchin's 5, you see him from a different angle, totally 90 degrees to the other side, and there is no ink blot there. So other areas, you know, like the windshield, and then what we believe is the crown jewel, the TSBD entrance, and this has been a topic of much controversy, but the OIC, we believe that we pretty much have it all figured out. Not only do we know that Lovelady is there and Joe Molina is there, and we know that Frazier was removed from that image, because once you start looking and you start taking inventory of all the people there, and you realize that if you look at the suit coat of Jack Reddy, who was the Secret Service man who's turned around, the first Secret Service man who's turned around, you can see that there is something funny going on there right in front of his chest there. And we believe that that's where Frazier was removed. And why was he removed? Well, I'm sure there's many reasons for that. And then I know that some people talked about that maybe Frazier was behind the trunk of the live oak tree. Well, my answer to that is that our Vince Landria went to Dealey Plaza that summer after the assassination, and he reenacted the Alchin 6 photograph. The detail is exquisite. If you look at that image, you'll see that many answers as to the Alchin 6, and one of those is that the trunk of the live oak tree would have never blocked Frazier out of the picture. Okay, and I invite those who are still skeptical about that to look at that. Vince Landria did that image, like I said, in the summer of '64. It goes back, to what happened. How did they conclude that it was Lovelady, the Oswald figure, which has been discussed many, many times. We believe that it is Oswald, it is Lee Oswald, and the shirt, the face, and everything. And I don't know about transferring features in such a small area, and if the technology existed at the time to do that, I don't think that would have been really necessary. I just think that what was available, the technology would have been enough to make it in a way that, for example, that they would place Lovelady in the spot of Oswald. Later on, I covered a little bit more of the doorway and precisely about Lovelady and the possibility of him being doorman. If you go back to his own testimony, where he told Joseph Ball where he was standing, and he said very clearly that he was at the top level, and that's in volume 6, page 339. But then Bob Jackson took a very famous picture of Lovelady, but he places him on the third step, 4 steps below where Lovelady said he was in his testimony. Right there, it's pretty obvious there that they worked very hard to create the impression that Lovelady was doorman. And then Ralph Finke went and did his reenactment, and I talked a little bit about that. I thought he had him pretty well placed, except for what at that time he didn't know that Joe Molina was actually only 5 foot tall. He's still alive. So the man that they call obfuscated man is actually Joe Molina, the one that's got one arm in front, one over his chest, and he's looking a little bit down Houston. We got most of them figured out. And we had Frazier. We talked a little bit about Frazier in 1977 with the House Select Committee on Assassination, where he did not testify, but he was interviewed. Rob Parker did these transcripts on those interviews. Frazier said a lot of things, in these interviews. But among them, sort of to summarize, he stated that he was very interested in staying right there. There's no way to get caught, standing there in the middle. And again, in 1977, he put a lot of resistance, to going and even talking to the HSCA. We talked a little bit about that. And then in these interviews, he also stated that, quote, "I tried to tell them the truth, and that made them very angry," end quote. Wow, that's very, very, very strange that he would say that. Maybe it's not so strange, because if he was trying to tell the truth, that would really explain a lot of the things about his life.
He was probably telling him that he was standing next to Lee in the doorway. Is a big
exactly.
Well,
exactly.
Yeah, it appears to me that he wanted to stay off of Penn Jones' suspicious death list, and they figured out how to do it by cooperating. It pays to cooperate, it appears. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left, so let's go ahead and wrap it up. And why such resistance to Oswald being in the doorway? It seems to be we just can't go there. We can't go around the limo stopping, when we've got a mountain of evidence on top of that. What is it, Larry?
Well, later on, I thought this was very, very interesting. We went and took measurements of the doorway, to establish, because Frazier has said many times, he was back in the shadows, and when Bugliosi took him, and when he testified in that mock trial in London, Bugliosi established where Frazier said he was standing in the shadows, in the alternate 6. But when you look, we went and we measured we went and measured the TSBD, the landing, the top landing. Just so happens that landing was remodeled, and that whole doorway was pushed inside, and we were wondering, well, how much was it pushed inside? Well, from 3 feet that it was at the time of the assassination, it was pushed in more than 9 feet. Some people say even a Volkswagen could fit up there,
Mm-hmm.
So that was very telling there. Basically, Frazier, said many, many different versions of where he was. Now, we actually had to construct a table, to accommodate all those different versions, and that was pretty interesting. We presented that, and Frazier had his epiphany, where he actually said that there was no way that, now he says that there was no way that Lee could have fit the rifle under his arm, and that he said that he tried to follow Lovelady and Shelley, but then he stayed up there, and they actually saw Lee cross Houston onto Elm Street. He confirmed that he was only at the Irving Professional Center for a short time. What I talked about earlier about Captain Fritz, and then this is very important because they asked him. He said regarding Lee's guilt, and he actually said, "I don't know anybody who can prove that. It's a theory." And on the Warren Commission, he said they already had their answers and were not interested in anything I had to say, and they tried to make me change my testimony. I mean, wow. And then about Joseph Ball, something that we have suspected for a long time now. I ran into one of the sharpest attorneys I have ever seen in my life, Mr. Ball. He was good, but I could not accept what he was trying to feed me. Finally, he said, that many of us, we should try to walk a couple of miles in his moccasins to conclude here, and we think Frazier has led, a very tormented life carrying this burden. But he still has a few secrets to reveal, I would like to exhort him to, come clean, tell us what he knows.
I think he's figured out how to stay alive there. I hate to say it, but he's too key to the assassination, and he's not going to talk. It's too important. All right, we're going to completely change gears right now. I know you've been doing some really hardcore research, and Dr. Fetzer actually said in the new generation of researchers that you're at the very top, so I would take that as a major badge of honor if he ever said anything like that about me. So kudos to you. All right, so you've been doing some work on the motorcycle cops, and we're going to bring that to the JFK community right now. So let's talk about Mr. Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. Thank you for those kind words. Davis Ellis was the sergeant in charge of the motorcycle detail, the motorcycle cops. And he had been advised to bring all the cops together for a meeting around 3 p.m. the day of the assassination. He was the officer in charge of actually making sure that each and every one was in their position along the motorcade route, and what exactly their functions would be, and the positions and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So he had some very interesting comments in these interviews.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's play him right now.
1971.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's play him right now and then we'll comment on him right afterwards.
There, when they unloaded the body of the president, do you remember what that looked like?
Well, he was just a mass of blood. His face and head, everything just a mass of blood.
Did you see any of the wounds on him at all?
No, I didn't get that close. I know that down on the street, a piece of his skull blew out of the car and blew over on the grass, and the kid picked it up, and the Secret Service man took it away from him and threw it in the back of the car. Our people, right there at the motor knew how bad he hurt. I knew he was hit. I didn't know how bad he was until my man Cheney came up there and said he had no chance. He said, he ain't got no chance, but let's go. He said his head was just, well, I didn't really know for sure until we got to the hospital, and there wasn't any chance for him. After talking to the officer, they come into the hospital.
And that piece of bone that the Secret Serviceman took from the young boy who's in the grass, then he came to the hospital, he threw it in the car there.
He put it in the car back at, right there as it happened. There, I remember.
Has it happened at on the street on Elm?
Yes, sir.
The president's limousine stopped for a while, right at that point.
Well, no, it didn't stop. It almost stopped. If you've ever ridden a motor, you know if you go so slow, your motor will want to lean to one side, you have to put your foot down and balance it.
Right.
Well, we were going so slow that that's what was happening. We just having to kick our foot down every once in a while. It was very slow pace. This was after the first shot was fired. They cut the speed. Secret Service cut the speed on the convoy.
You know for how long?
Well, it was just momentarily. It never did stop, but it almost stopped. It got so slow, and we were just barely moving. And then they hollered, "Go, go, go! Let's go!" You know, get him to the hospital as quick as you can.
Wow, what an amazing clip that is. The idea, I mean, I'm a motorcycle guy. If you have to reach your leg out, that's pretty much stopped. So maybe he never stopped rolling. But what do you think about that one?
Well, the most significant portions of Ellis's interview happened to be well, first of all, what you just mentioned, you know, about the motorcade stopping, but also that thing about the piece of skull being thrown back into the limo by a Secret Service agent who had been handed it to him by a boy who picked it up, you know, on the infield of the the infield of Elm Street there, and that would be the south side. And other things that are in that interview that we have not touched on yet also are the issue of the hole in the windshield, which he actually put a pencil through at Parkland, and also where he also knows, and he was told by the other officers that another Secret Service agent actually went into the limo, and he witnessed this because he was the one officer along with Saney who led the motorcade onto Parkland.
Wow.
Some people and some researchers have always thought that it was Cheney and Jackson, and that is not so. It was Cheney and Ellis, the two officers who actually led the convoy onto Parkland, at a high rate of speed, beyond 60 miles an hour.
All right. Well, just amazing. All right, let's go into Bobby Hargis. We were kind of a little pressed for time. Here we go. Bobby Hargis, the one who actually thought that he was shot. He got hit so hard with the brains of the president.
Was that the only time that it stopped? That and over at the on Elm Street?
Yeah, I believe so.
Do you remember how long it stopped when it was on Elm Street?
Oh, you mean after that first shot?
Right.
Only about 3-4 seconds, maybe 5 or 6. That's all.
You say it stopped for about 5 or 6 seconds?
Yeah, but you won't find that Warren Commission report.
Don't they claim that it stopped?
Huh?
Don't they claim that it stopped?
No. I don't think he didn't. You've seen a rolling stop, haven't you? It was going less than 1 mile an hour.
Right.
Well, that's what he was doing. He wasn't completely stopped to the dead still.
You guys on the bike must have had a hell of a time trying to stay up on a bike.
Yeah, we did.
Just about walking it.
Huh?
You were just about walking with it.
Yeah, that's right. We bought our clutches quite a bit on escorts like that.
Right.
Just amazing. All right, let's talk about that one.
Yeah, I think, Gary, this is a major revelation here, where Hargis actually says that, it stopped for 3 to 4 seconds, and maybe more, like 5 to 6. And what's so significant here, he also makes the comment here that you won't find this in the Warren Commission report. I think this is, absolutely amazing here, where Hargis, he totally blows this whole thing, out of the water. And he knows, and all these other motorcycle cops know exactly, how and when that motorcade stopped.
There's just no denying that the Z film has been faked after this evidence. All right, let's go into James Cheney, the other motorcycle cop. Here we go. That one hums like that all the time?
Yeah,
okay, I'll be able to take that now. We're going to skip that one, and we'll play that one on the next week's show. I have exactly the software to take that out. We're going to go ahead and go to Billy Martin. That was actually not audible.
The film, the Zapruder film, is an 8mm film that I'm going to send you.
All right.
All right, take a look at it, and I'll give you a call. See what you see in it.
All right, I will do.
Because we see a lot of things in there. In fact, we see one thing which is very disturbing, that the car doesn't even stop in that film. Doesn't even slow down.
Doesn't slow down at all.
No, somebody's monkeying around with something.
I was sworn that it was the time that he tried to get up, that the car stopped, and then
You said who was trying to get up?
The agent after the shooting. That when he came up and jumped on the back of the car, at that instant is when it stopped, and I believe he lost his balance. And then they started again, and of course it was throwing him off, and that's when she turned around and I thought was trying to have him get up on the, have him up on the back of the limousine.
That's not what Hargis feels.
You don't think it is?
No, he feels he wants to get the hell out of there.
Well, that may be true too, but I really don't think so. I think she was trying to hit him up on the car. I don't believe that she was, that's not, I don't believe that'd be a normal human reaction to climb over the back of a vehicle when you're so used to going out a door.
All right, let's talk about Billy Martin.
Well, Billy Martin, the fourth motorcycle officer who was in the immediate vicinity of the JFK limo, and he also is telling us that the motorcade stopped, that the limo stopped. So we've got all four of them. I just wanted to briefly mention Cheney, which we were not able to play at this moment. Cheney actually says and talks about how Hargis ran in between the two limos after he had stopped on his way to the grassy knoll there, actually where he went up to the pedestal where Zapruder had been filming. And you don't see this in any of the films, which indicates that most of the films have been altered And that's just what we're seeing, nowadays. But the significance of these recordings cannot be understated, Gary, because these are the actual people who were there.
That's what they saw. All right, we're getting close on time. We're going to do Douglas Jackson, and then we'll be out of here.
Sure.
Think of the film. I liked it. The only thing is, I thought that caravan stopped. It didn't. Right. That's, I was just speaking with Jim and with Bobby before you. Hargis and Cheney. Yeah. And we sort of went over a couple of points, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's one of the points we did discuss with them.
Yeah, so he's saying that he didn't see it stop in the Zapruder film either. It's just about hands down. Now, quickly, what is going on with the JFK research community that they are fighting us tooth and nail, namely Sitka, about the fact that the Zapruder film is a fraud?
I have no idea, Gary. This is something that is pretty clear-cut. We've also found new evidence, which has been advanced by Beverly Brunson, where the Zapruder frame 255, we have now proven that James Chaney has been painted out of these frames in the immediate vicinity where you see the Alton 6, James Chaney looking into the limo, and he's parallel with JFK and Jackie almost in the same horizontal plane. But you don't see that in the Zapruder film.
Yeah, we're going to have to do a show. We're going to have to do a show about the female researchers. There are so many, and Miss Brunson was all over it. And like we were discussing earlier, it seems they had the whole thing solved back in the 60s with Wiseman and these ladies. So
that's right.
All right, we're running out of time. I'd like to keep on going, but we have to go. So appreciate you, Larry, and we'll talk to you real soon. And we're going to have Mr. Ralston K up next week. Thanks a lot, Larry.